There's nothing more powerful, more pressing than a deadline. Because a deadline just comes and can neither be stopped nor avoided. Important to remember, of course, that while time runs out and the deadline arrives, does not mean that the long dreamt of project will be successfully completed, far less actually delivered. A deadline for delivery of a new world of serfs governed by a trillionaire parasite class of sadistic fantasists can, and I say will, come and go without success, in just the same way that opening night of a brand new restaurant offering nothing to eat but wildly overpriced ashes and dust washed down with other people's urine is looking certain failure in the face. To mix metaphors, the train will run out of track and hit the buffers. The faster it is driven, the bigger the bang. Those buffers are close for those driving the train. The deadline is upon the architects of the New World Order. And all of the frenzy, the false flags, the threat of Russian invasion, the end of the world on account of cars and gas boilers, the hysterical nonsense day and night by a pantomime cast of hopelessly bad actors that lost its audience long ago, all of the madness all around is on account of the clock running out and the big project facing certain disaster. This fact, the imminence of the deadline, also explains all the suicide notes written by recent governments all around the world. When did any of them, Tory or Labour here in Britain, for instance, last even promise jam tomorrow? For years now, the message from either side has been, it's bad today and it'll be worse tomorrow, so suck it up, proles. None of them are working towards re-election because that long-running farce is over. When they go this time, it's with the intention, indeed the absolute certainty, of never coming back. Today's leaders, every last one of them, is frantically packing its bags. That sound you hear is the engine revving in the getaway car parked on the street outside. This also explains the targeting all over Europe of political parties that attempt, however hopelessly, to challenge the willful destruction of civilization. If a so-called election might return someone with a beating heart and a conscience, then that election is cancelled or that candidate is jailed. The time of elections, of so-called democracy, is behind us. But I say that's nothing to lament, because so-called liberal democracy was always a lie. Good riddance to bad rubbish. The explanation for all the otherwise inexplicably destructive behaviour by the powerful is, as I say, because there's a deadline looming. For us in Britain, the imminence of a deadline was revealed in an obvious way with the thing they called COVID. Economy wrecked, lives ended or destroyed, no apologies and no consequences for the culprits. Remember as well, and this is also important, it started with the Tories and it continued under Labour. This has nothing to do with politics as we have known it. The faces are irrelevant, the politics are irrelevant, because there is one destination and one destination only. All that changes is the speed. Realistic energy that people can rely on and afford has been done away with. Ruinous net zero targets guarantee disaster across the board for human life. We know this. Every sentient human being on the planet knows this. The completion of the long, slow bleeding out of deindustrialisation. Germany has more people employed making toys than building military hardware, and yet their Chancellor is promising war with Russia. Is deliberate policy, censorship of dissent, jail time for posts on social media, and understanding and leniency for child rapists and other monsters, no more trial by jury, because the days of the pesky people being able to have a say in the creation and application of laws they are supposed to live by is over. Britain's not a serious country. Britain is not a democracy, if ever was. The same's true everywhere. It's all because of that one immovable deadline, the one the psychos have had set for them by people we never see. And it's all about to blow up in their faces, possibly literally. The direction of travel for planet Earth has been set, and all the usual suspects, Tory and Labour, Republican and Democrat, whatever and whoever, they are all working towards the deadline. I do wonder, in all seriousness, just how many suicide notes a governing establishment can write. The COVID regulations were a suicide note for the economy. Net zero and Agenda 2030, that's a suicide note for millions of people around the world who will be left powerless, literally without power, for heating, for cooling, for fertiliser to grow food. In Britain and elsewhere, the legislation against farmers and farming, culminating in the inheritance tax that crucifies family farms, is a suicide note written on behalf of those left with nowhere to go, no more moves to make this side of the grave. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer sat in a committee room recently, and when informed by fellow Labour MPs that old farmers with terminal illnesses were seeking actively to die before a deadline next year because they saw it as their best and only option, his response was essentially that the ends justify the means.
Is the Prime Minister aware that some farmers who have terminal diagnosis now are actively planning to expedite their own deaths so they hit before April? Is he aware of that?
I've had discussions with a number of individuals who've drawn all manner of things to my attention.
As Joe Stalin used to say, there's no use being squeamish if the deaths of a few more millions will get you where you want to go. And then, of course, there's the promise of war with Russia. It should go without saying that a government that cannot stop hundreds of thousands of foreign fighting-age men arriving on its south coast in rubber dinghies cannot credibly pretend the ability to turn back the Russians or anybody else. Neither can that government, regardless of how many generals it puts in front of cameras, undo the terminal damage done to any notions of patriotism, far less willingness to serve. You cannot, in all seriousness, call on a citizen army from among generations raised by the establishment to feel nothing but shame and contempt in regard to their nation and national heritage. A generation raised in the shadow of own nothing and be happy, belong nowhere because nations are obstacles to globalist progress, has internalised the thought that it literally has nothing for which to fight. I say there's not going to be a war, unless Britain and Europe starts, obviously, and possibly with a false flag event of the sort Western democracies are so fond of, in the same way that Russia didn't start the war in Ukraine, that war having been provoked and then started. And if you don't know this already, for God's sake, wake up, by NATO, whose scheming saw the overthrow of an elected Ukrainian president disinclined towards Washington and his replacement with one ready to kneel towards the West. Cue years of brutal warfare against ethnic Russians in the east of the country and the final inevitability of Putin's intervention. Newland has recently, incidentally, been the rising star of what they call the National Endowment for Democracy. Talk about the inability to make it up. And remember, it's not just panto season. It most definitely is false flag season too. Look out, as we say, it's behind you. Anyone aping the old ways, like representing political parties promising change, is rearranging deck chairs aboard a Titanic that hit the iceberg miles back. The crucial thing about the suicide notes I mentioned, the ones littering the landscape now, is that the authors have absolutely no intention of dying themselves. Anything but. What we're dealing with is the kind of suicide note left on top of a pile of discarded clothes on a beach. No body will be found because the author has vanished into a new life elsewhere. The pain and devastation will be for those left behind, asking questions without answers. I say again, this is all, from the COVID scam onwards, about a deadline. The way we have lived, illusions of democracy, fiat currency, limitless upgrades and limitless refills, is all about to hit the buffers and the deadline. The frauds behind the suicide notes likely have no options. Everyone has a price. And if not a price, then a threat they cannot ignore. Threat to self, threat to partner, threat to kids. The Godfather is always able to make an offer that cannot be refused, not even by presidents. I say again, The deadline is upon us. And I say that's a good thing, something we need. The big project they mean to deliver, the brave new world the puppet masters have worked so hard for, it's a dud, it's a bust. It ain't ever going to happen. All they've made in the end is a mess. They can write all the fake suicide notes they want. They can stuff the boot of the getaway car with all the funny money in the world, but I tell you, their inky fingerprints are all over the joint, and they ain't going nowhere, and their cards are marked. If you've enjoyed this content, please remember to like and subscribe, and if you haven't done so already, go to the App Store and download the GB News app.